I'm Cassidy Ford, and this is the Franchise Ticker Podcast. It's a home for people, whether you are in the franchise community or not, to live freely in that place where our personal and professional worlds intersect. Welcome to the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Franchise Ticker Podcast. I am Cassidy Ford, and today I am joined by Stan Friedman. If you don't already know Stan, you are about to get to know him. He is the president of FRM Solutions, which is just a little company that I happen to work for, and also the co-founder of Zor Forum, which started out to be a service for emerging franchisors. But Stan, am I hearing correctly that you are actually coming to market as an emerging franchise yourself?
That is exactly correct. Not by design, but it is exactly correct.
So today I want to talk to you about Zor Forum because this is a really amazing thing that has kind of come to be out of many years of experience. And I want to hear how all of this developed and what this is and how you're going to be able to help the world through this, the world of franchising, essentially. But we're also, going to talk about the fact that you and I work together. And we do not always see eye to eye. Some of that is generational. Some of that is just the fact that we are two very different people, but we have a really awesome relationship and have been able to do some really important and successful things, not just with FRM, but just as human beings. So I wanted to talk about that today and some of the stories that we have together over the course of the last 3.5 years that we have been at FRM together. But are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for all of the above. I'm just shocked and awed that it's 3.5 years already, because I really don't feel like that's the case at all. It just doesn't feel that long.
Sometimes
I know for you it probably feels a lot longer, but
sometimes it doesn't feel like very long at all, but sometimes it does feel like it's been 10 years.
We all have those days. We all have those days.
So, all right. I wanted to start out and ask you, when you were looking for someone, so I am in a capacity at FRM in which I do sales and consulting and client satisfaction, and I wear a lot of different hats. And it was not necessarily what you were looking for that role when you were hiring, and it's just evolved obviously over the last few years. Did you have any hesitations about hiring a millennial?
No hesitations at all. I had no hesitations because I think I did it with eyes open wide and understood that I was inviting the kind of relationship that actually has ensued. So for me, I think I did it with a properly managed expectation that the world doesn't just revolve around the things that I think are or aren't, but that I'm inviting young blood into an organization, and a pretty tightly knit organization. We're not huge, right? So each person's contribution, each person's role in the business is really, really critical. And the ability to function cohesively as a team is really critical. But I think that all of those pieces and parts should be part of a relationship that has yin and yang. It ought not to anyone, look at a baseball team. I mean, you've got all these different personalities and all these different players and all these different positions, and not everybody agrees with what you ought to do when you get up to bat, but you all have to figure it out together. And while you've got individual personalities and individual players, you all still come together and function as a team. And so I feel that's kind of what we've got, is all of us are diverse in different ways, but we're each very much interdependent on the other. And we know where the lines are, and we know where the core competencies are, and we honor and respect the things that we agree on. And we agree to disagree about the things that we don't, but we do it politely, respectfully, and at the end of the day, one of us or the other sucks it up when we're proven wrong.
It is one of those things that you and I have had a lot of good conversations over time about what it means, because we joke back and forth, right? I call you a boomer, I call you old man. We crack jokes when we're on sales calls and all sorts of things and give each other a hard time. But at the end of the day, we certainly are from two generations. Do you think that the stereotypes are true about boomers and about millennials? And we're going to leave, Gen Z out of the conversation right now, because I know that's they're entering the workforce and everything. But from
Well, what you're
just
basically saying is you don't want to have to deal with that conversation today because Gen Z is to you what you are to me.
Hey, if you'll notice, have gotten rid of my side part, and I am not wearing skinny jeans right now. So, no, just simply from the context of our relationship,
Sure.
let's talk about the stereotypes a little bit. Do you think that I have fulfilled some of those? And then maybe I can talk about how, what I feel about some of those boomer stereotypes.
Yeah, I definitely think that you fulfill a great many of the millennial stereotypes. And I think that those are facts of life that really don't require an opinion. I really don't think that it would be so arrogant to suggest that there's not differences that you could stereotype between millennials per se and boomers per se. Doesn't mean that every single one of us is guilty as charged of all things that are millennial or boomer, but the stereotypes, there's enough of it out there to say that those stereotypes will cause people to smile because it's well known. So things that are important to boomers might not have been as important to you guys. Um, some of your motivations might be different, and you trade in currencies that go beyond money, and things are important to you more so about culture and about comfort and about contributions to society that might be different than were for boomers in the workplace. And so to me, Cassidy, I view it a whole lot like I do anything in franchise development, which is where my roots in this industry come from. And that is, doesn't matter what I think, and it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what is, and meeting people where they are, and then creating opportunities for communication and for mutual benefit that are born out of the respect to say, I'm different from you, and guess what? I know it. And you're different from me, and guess what? I know it. Now let's find out where the concentricity between us lies. Let's get into that concentric part of the circle that we can both function comfortably within and build out from there. Me helping you see my points of view,
Mm-hmm.
you helping me see yours. And by functioning from within that concentric middle, we have each given ourselves the ability to say, you've earned respect. I've earned yours. You've earned mine. Let's use that as a template and keep going. And that's kind of what's happened over 3.5 amazing years that I don't believe still aren't quite that long.
No. All right, so that's actually a good point, because that we're talking from an age standpoint here. Actually, you and I have talked before about ageism. I come into a conversation or a call, or now all these video meetings, and I look like I'm 12. I sound like I'm 12 over the phone, and I don't, people underestimate me. And I know that you've kind of experienced something in the reverse, as far as people considering you, well, he's been in the game for so long, he's not fresh, he's not, all of these things. They make an assumption about you that I have found to be untrue
I heard
sometimes.
that before, actually. I've never heard anybody say that about me, but
Well, you know what I mean. Just like in general, as far as coming into the game. Here's an example of that. There was a piece that I wrote that has been
mhm.
mentioned on this podcast that you and I had a real vocal just agree to disagree kind of conversation together about that. In fact, now that was the idea of this new guard versus old guard in franchising. I do not believe that the new guard versus the old guard is a thing. That is something that I was referring to that someone else had mentioned to me. But let's have a conversation about that a little bit, because that encompasses not just, younger people and older people. It is really what you're talking about. If I am a leader and I have years of experience, and someone else who is maybe not young even, but has fewer years of experience and is trying to change the game a little bit, what is that all about? Why did you react so strongly to what I had written about transformational change?
It's hard for me to remember the exact piece. I should have read it again before today if I was going to be asked to comment on it. But I think that there's a thing about, and as I remember, I think that it deals more with the boys club or the good old club or the
Mhm.
outsiders versus insiders. And in franchising, there's such a need for interdependency and for new blood, and it's in anything. It's in politics, it's in government. It's just a requirement that there not be a blockade and exclusivity, and there needs to be an interdependency and the ability to work collectively. And there are new ideas that I think come with people who bring fresh views to a situation that might be viewed differently by somebody who's looked at doing the same thing similar ways for a great many years.
Mhm.
How you present it, or how you make assumptions about, that people that have been around a long time are closed-minded, would be something that would have caused me to be upset,
Mhm.
or I would take exception to it, because I don't believe that there are as many people that think that way as might be assumed just because they've been around that long.
Mhm.
So that might be part of it. I think that there are a lot of smart people that are coming into our business and into this business model, bringing fresh ideas about how to do things. And again, like anything else, it doesn't matter what I think, and it doesn't matter who agrees or disagrees. What matters is, if that's where people are, you need to meet them where they are, flesh it out. There are some people, I've got a good friend in this business, and won't call out his name, but for a long time, he never thought that text messaging was important to his business.
Mhm.
He's a tremendous, one of the best in franchise development, but just took for granted that now in our kind of sphere, in our world, texting's not important. To which I say, I don't agree. I don't agree, because it is important. It's a basic form of communication that's proven again and again to create results much quicker and more instantly than email might, or phone and voicemail do. And it's not me that should try to prove it because I think it's true, and it's not my good friend who should disprove it because he thinks it's not. It's empirical. There's data to support it. And if the data says it is what it is, if it were a millennial, or it was an older person, or if it was a woman, or it was a man, or if it was somebody in franchising for 50 years or somebody for 5 years, wouldn't really matter. What would matter is, take the data and make a decision based on it. And if you're not doing those things, and you're doing things based on personal biases, then you're not long for this world probably anyway, because that's just not the way the world functions. Between or within same generations or generations apart, you've got to have yin and yang. You've got to have communication. You've got to have collaboration.
Mhm.
And to have any and all of those things, you've got to have trust in the people that you're dealing with.
Trust is a huge part of all of that. I think between you and I, especially, I have learned a lot over the last however many years that I've been in franchising about the fact that we have to, have people in our corner, And sometimes the people in our corners, we challenge each other and we challenge our thought processes. And there's a great deal of trust that has to exist in order to do that. And we kind of have to put ourselves out there to extend that and to receive it. I'm wondering, in that moment of challenging each other, for just what are some of the ways that I know where I have had to take a step back and say, all right, Stan is offering up some constructive criticism here. And he knows what he's talking about. And right in this moment, I don't want to hear it. But I have taken that constructive criticism and applied it the best I know how. And you've guided me in certain ways. And that has been very, very helpful to me to change my behaviors. And I'm kind of wondering, what are, because you're someone who's constantly evolving, whether it's from me or from, because we have a lot of young people in our company. um what are some of the ways you feel like you've been challenged that have resulted in in really creative ways that we've moved our company forward?
Well, I think the challenge for me is to make certain that I don't make assumptions about certain things. I would suggest to you that 2013, 14, 15, my first couple of 3 years around FRM, I was spending a lot more time coming to an office than I do now. And a lot of the people I saw in the office were kids in my mind. They were backpackers. They had these cans on their ears when they came in. They got a backpack on their back. And every minute of every day that they're not sitting in front of their computer doing what they do, they were on their devices doing the same things. Not exactly the most engaging or social people, which for me is very different than the world that I live in. So I remember when I first came to FRM, I was given the choice of 2 or 3 offices to pick which one I wanted. And I picked what was perceived to be the worst of the 3. And for me, it was by design. It was right in front of the break room.
Mm.
And so the most heavily trafficked pattern of people on feet every day would walk by my door. I mean, even more than the restrooms, because the restrooms, you got one for ladies and one for guys, one break room for everybody. Everybody's going to come by my door. And what it did for me was it gave me a platform for engagement. It gave me an opportunity to stop people coming by my door with on their way to or waiting for a cup of coffee to brew. Hey, who are you? What do you do? And they would look at me with fear. Oh my God, this is a human asking me to have a conversation, and it's an old human at that. So it was kind of an interesting thing to do. It was fun for me because I was pushing some people out of their comfort zones. And it was fun for me because they were pushing me out of mine to do it. But it was terrific. Some of those people learned from me that I'm involved with the National Buffalo Wing Festival, or I'm involved with the Professional Athlete Franchise Initiative, and these people or those people. And it was like, wow, now we have a common ground here, don't we? Suddenly this fossil is somebody that I can talk with and have a conversation with. And the next day they brought somebody with them and we'd do it again. So I found that to be challenging in the first place. It was daunting for me. It was a little intimidating. I'm the oldest guy in the house, and I could either hide from it or I could try to adapt to it. And I had a lot of fun adapting to it.
I have, there is an anecdote. I have chosen to engage myself in a way that has pushed me out of my comfort zone. If we're talking about, you know, um, trying trying to be on our phones all the time, or not be conversation starters or that sort of thing. I do think that that's a stereotype of millennials too, but I and also know that we are conversation starters in a way that is unexpected, right? And I had chosen several years ago to make my platform LinkedIn. If you remember this, if you remember back in 2018, I had written my first article about having Tourette's, and I put that on LinkedIn. And what do you remember? What was the response that you started hearing from people?
I heard from a couple of people that are our clients that said, too much information, or I didn't know that, but I don't, it's typical when people don't understand something, the thing they want to do is the first instinct is to recoil from what you don't know. If it makes you uncomfortable or it puts you out of your own comfort zone involuntarily, you didn't ask for that. So somebody or two or three may have made comments about too much information. Maybe that would be better on Facebook than on LinkedIn, or
Right.
put that in your social playground instead of your social business ground. That's kind of what I remember.
Hmm. And over time, and my goal was to take that, because I've always said to you, and this has always been the truth, right? That that is my truth of living with Tourette's in the midst of my professional life. And you've seen that. I can't separate those two things, right?
Oh, it's absolutely true.
Yeah. And over time, my goal was to transition away from LinkedIn, which I'll be able to do this summer with the launch of my website. But how do you think the attitude has changed, or has it at all, over the last couple of years with having some of those more open conversations? Do you think that those opinions are still out there about, oh, there's a line and you can't say this and you shouldn't say this? What does that look like? And do you think it's a generational thing, or do you think that it's just differing opinions?
But I think that transparency is a really, really key component in so many things that we do and how we do what we do. So I think sharing with somebody who may not know that they're getting on a call with somebody who's got a disorder or what's the word for Tourette's? I don't want to call it a disorder. What is it? It's
I mean, it's a condition, it's a
a condition.
disability,
That's a
it's a
perfect word.
condition. Yeah.
And so teeing that up for somebody is a way to help them understand that they're going to be getting on a call, that they should understand that the person on the other side isn't drunk or isn't slurring words or isn't, hungover or whatever. And
Sometimes I'm hungover, okay?
well,
Let's
but you
just
see, you get to, that's not fair actually, because you get to hide behind that and say, oh,
you just come in cranky. I'm actually
yeah. But the reality to me, Cassidy, is that transparency is teeing that up to somebody in advance and giving them
Mhm.
a heads up. And so then they don't get they don't go taken aback by that when it shows up. And at the end of the day, it helps them get to know you and who you really are, and look past those things that otherwise might have been things that they were busy, distracted looking at, to the place where, like, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York as a kid, and 30 feet away from where I put my head to bed every night was the New York City elevated train going by every 3 minutes, making noise like anybody who didn't live there could never understand. How can you not hear that? Well, it's part of my life. It is
Right.
what it is. And when people get to know the Cassidy that's behind the tick, or the person that emanates from within out, you stop seeing it. You don't even, I don't, I don't even observe it anymore. It's just part of who Cassidy is, and you love her or you don't. So I think that, with clients that interact with you daily, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked to learn that anyone really sees that as
Yeah.
a problem of any kind dealing with you, because there's so much other that comes emanating from you that's bright lights and sunshine. So it is just part of all of us. We each have our
Yes.
shit, Cassidy. Can I say that? I
Yeah,
think I
well,
just did.
I was gonna say, you had labeled that a little bit as us being shit disturbers, because it is that point in time where you really are becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, And that is a process. Like just now, when you were like, okay, so what do I call this? I don't call it a disorder. That is you becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. And not everybody will ask me that question. And so it is one of those things where we just have to, I have to put myself out there to make you feel more comfortable putting yourself out there.
And I think that's why sharing with somebody coming into a first time meeting with Cassidy Ford that hasn't been exposed to you before, a heads up might help them deal
Yeah.
with it and not be taken aback or like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything, Cassidy, at the end of the day, if those people who find themselves so moved negatively, if they're shallow enough to let that be a problem for them, then I have a problem with them. And that's just the way it is.
I think you're speaking from many years of experience in a lot of mentorship through the franchise space and in franchising. I think that's a perfect segue because you have worked with a lot of different kinds of people in a lot of different capacities, and you have just embarked on a new adventure, specifically working with emerging franchisors where you can share your experience in another capacity. So that is Zor Forum. What is Zor Forum? Why is it important, and how is this building up the future of franchising?
So that's a lot to unpack right there, but I'm going to take a whack at it. So Zor Forum is a mastermind group. It's an organization. So to put it in context for those who may be familiar with EO or YPO or Vistage, these are all mastermind peer groups. And peer groups are designed, and when they're delivered in forum type environments, to have a facilitator and maybe 6, 8, or 10 people around the table that are business people that are paying to be part of this forum, to bounce ideas off of one another, to have professional facilitation, to put out assignments or to put out a project and have a monthly meeting, and somebody takes a piece of it, of the project, and somebody takes another piece, and then you come back and you report out on what it is that you accomplished, what you learned, what it meant, and to just be able to come together monthly in that synergistic environment of trust in a 3-hour meeting and be able to not be so lonely as it might be to be a small business owner without a universe of people that you think you can know or trust.
Right.
So a lot of these types of groups have existed for years. And then as part of my weekly podcast, which we didn't talk about at the beginning, but I do host it.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Franchise Today, I had an interview with a guest who was part of a group of emerging franchisors who for the last 6 or 7 years has been seeing each other as part of their annual travels to expos, to broker conferences, to IFA events. And they found that they were all similar in that they were emerging franchisors. They were at similar stages of growth in their brands. None of them were directly competing with one another. And they started to just come into their meetings several times a year, like a half day early, get together, have a few drinks, share some best practices. And that it kind of evolved over time into them really sitting down and seating themselves as a professional peer group. And one of the franchisors in the group, got facilitation training and became a facilitator. And they all signed confidentiality and non-disclosures with each other. And they actually started giving each other help and guidance and sharing vital personal and business information that they now, 7 or so years later, all say has made an integral difference in their personal and business lives.
Trust.
And it's evidenced by the fact that some of them have cashed out rather nicely over the last couple of years. And so Dave Pasgan was one of those. He was the franchisor of 101 Mobility, and Dave cashed out of 101 Mobility about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, and was wondering what his next play was going to be. And he was encouraged by others that were in that franchisor group to say, Dave, why don't you do for franchising what you've done for us? Why don't you keep doing this? Put a program together that lets the emerging franchisors have a place to go to not be so lonely, that they've got 8 or 9 or 10 others just like them, and a professional facilitator that can help guide them to the relationships and to the projects and to the things that they need to know.
Right.
And so he kicked that idea around. I heard about it and invited him to the podcast as my guest. And when I got on there and started talking about this with him, I was kind of like a pinball in a pinball machine. I was bouncing with ideas and how exciting this seemed to me. And I marveled at how, is it possible that nobody's thought of this before? I mean, there are suppliers in the IFA supplier forum that are in categories 10, 12 deep, 15 deep.
Mm-hmm.
Look at lawyers, and look at accountants, look at CRM. And I just couldn't believe that this wasn't out there already. And so I kept nagging Dave. I kept calling him, talking with excitement and enthusiasm about it and how I thought this could look. And he and I started taking these conversations a little further down the road. And he invited my participation, or he kicked the tires for my interest in participation. And I kicked right back. And I said, I'd love to be a part of this. And then he asked me about another gentleman who he had been having ongoing conversations with about this, who expressed very similar enthusiasm for it as I did. And that would be Graham Chapman. And lo and behold, Graham, Dave, and I have partnered and began bringing Zorforum out as a supplier to help emerging franchisors be able to benefit from those same things that I've just described that Dave and his peer group did. Well, along the way, it takes, sometimes the forest is so close that you can't see the trees.
Right.
We had no idea. We didn't even think about this being a franchise until we were told by a good friend and franchise attorney that it doesn't matter what you think. Just like I said earlier, it doesn't matter what you think. You're going to ask somebody to operate under a brand name, Zorforum. You're going to ask somebody to share in revenue as your facilitators of these groups, and you're going to provide an operating system to them to be able to invite people to sit at tables that they're going to facilitate. It doesn't really matter whether you realize it yet or not, but this is a franchise, and you can't bring this to market unless it is a franchise. Well, you could, but you might run afoul of the FTC in some 13 or 14 states that would disagree with you. So we took a closer look at this, and then we said, this is a franchise. And so we've got an FDD being produced by Mike Drum, and we've got an ops manual being produced by the Fran man, Kid Vincent. And the three of us are embarking upon bringing Zorforum out to market as a franchise concept that's going to be able to bring a tremendous amount of benefit to the loneliest people in the world, emerging franchisors.
So why is that so important? Like, to go back to that, because there was a lot to unpack from those three questions. What does this mean for building up new generations in franchising? Because this whole conversation really boils down to building up new generations of leaders in franchising through mentorship, leadership by example. How does this play into that?
Well, it plays into all of it because that's exactly what it is. So think about IFA, think about an emerging franchisor just coming to his first IFA convention. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. You're overwhelmed with who do you reach to, who do you trust, how do you know what you don't know? You get up at 3:00 in the morning with a question in your head about something that's business related, and you're all alone. So emerging franchisors, there are 300-400 new ones each and every year. And literally, some of those now are young millennial or even Gen Y or Zs that are franchisors, not just prospective or franchisees or existing franchisees. But I would suggest to you that emerging franchisors of any age, of any generation, need to have a place to go to benefit from the wisdom of others that are in the same pot of stew that they're in. And they could take a seat at a table, just like we could at a round table at an IFA, and there's somebody seated to your right that has cracked the code on something that you've not figured out yet, and they've given you the gift of their wisdom. And the same can happen with the person seated to your left, who you've cracked the code on something and you can help them. And so this is the kind of an environment that will help assure that those coming up get a quicker and a faster track toward their own education and learning best practices and facilitating the growth and the development of their brands and their cultures as they're inviting newbies into their businesses as franchisees. And so who better to teach and to help the Zor make the right decisions in his own business as foundational to bringing and inviting people into his house as his franchisees with a better rounded, better educated, better grounded franchisor. Because we all know that as emerging brands, if everything was going right 100% of the time, and if it was an airplane ride, it would still feel like this because it's so much in flux every day. So I just think that there's anything that can help emerging franchisors ground that out and level it out, round out their knowledge, their education, their understanding of the cultural pieces and parts of the business, not just the secret sauce of their particular brand, is going to make for a better franchise community and maybe assure greater success of younger brands on their way up.
It is one of the hallmarks of franchising, that of the business model, right? That we give an opportunity, but not just give an opportunity, give support for it. So whether it is a moment of disagreement and challenging each other, or a moment of laying out a foundation, if it is an age difference, if it is just an experience difference, whatever we can offer each other, I think is where the future of franchising comes from, right?
Couldn't agree more.
Right. Well, we are coming up close out of time. Where can people find you? They can find you at Franchise Today podcast.
Yep. Franchise Today, anywhere podcasts are found. You can find me at FRM Solutions, S. Friedman at FRMSolutions.com. You can find me at Stan at sensiblefranchising.com. And don't have a Zor Forum address yet, but come on. Even on LinkedIn, everything on LinkedIn, go to my LinkedIn profile. My phone number is there. My email addresses are all there. So I'm pretty accessible and easily found.
And like I said, if you didn't already know Stan, you know a lot about him now. He loves to connect with people in franchising. If you're into buffalo wings, all of the above, find Stan on LinkedIn or email him or give him a call. But thank you so much, Stan. It's always I never know what to expect when you and I get into one of our long chats. So I always learn something.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, why did I waste my time doing this today? Or 10 being, this is probably one of the better conversations we've had. Where does this one roll up for?
I'm going to say a good 5. No,
Oh,
I'm just
really?
kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, this is a great conversation. You've got a great perspective that always challenges me. And I am in total agreement. What you're doing with Zor Forum is really important for emerging brands. And it's going to provide a new outlet as an emerging brand itself that has not existed before for building up, new leaders in this space.
Well, and what you're doing with the ticker and what you're doing with IFA and what you're doing with spreading your wings and growing beyond the role that brings us together for commercial viability is something I'm extremely proud of, and you just keep doing it.
Thank you so much. So, all right, we'll stop recording and I'll talk to you in about 5 minutes, probably.
Fair enough.
All right, bye.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Ticker podcast. You can follow the Franchise Ticker on Instagram and Twitter at the handle @Franchise Ticker. Don't forget to subscribe to our videos on YouTube and like, comment, and share. See you on the next episode.